Hey there, welcome back to White River Homestead. Today, we're in the kitchen. It's that time of the year where the garden is going crazy. I have cucumbers galore, and I can't give them away fast enough. So I'm attempting to make dill relish. Come along while I take this adventure for the first time. So the first thing I want to show you is the recipe. I got the recipe from this ball canning book. It is absolutely incredible. If you plan on harvesting, preserving, doing anything, get you this book. It's linked in our Amazon store down in the comments. You can find it there. It's absolutely incredible. And I'm just doing a simple dill relish recipe. I have so many cucumbers. We've made pickles. I've given them away. I just can't keep up. So I'm going to go ahead and can a bunch of dill relish so I can use that throughout the winter. I love dill relish on all kinds of stuff. I make my own tartar sauce, different stuff like that. I use dill relish. I put it on hot dogs in the summer, and it's really difficult to find sometimes. So here, we're going to make our own, and I won't have to worry about that. So I have my recipe. The first thing it calls for is 8 pounds of cucumbers. I have easily 8 pounds of cucumbers because I probably have double that. So I have my cucumbers over here ready. Drinking a kombucha here. Make sure you have a drink handy because this can get exhausting. So good. My cutting board, my food processor, and I'm ready to go. So the first step is it says in a food processor, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get our cucumbers cut up into their smaller sizes so we can put those into the food processor. Okay, so we are here ready to chop some cucumbers. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove both of the ends. You really only need to remove the blossom end, but I remove both just to be safe so I know that I got the correct end. The blossom end actually has a bunch of enzymes in it that can cause your cucumbers to go really soft once you can them. So I just cut both ends up, and then I'm just going to pick. It doesn't really matter the size, you just want them to be small enough that you can toss them in and around the food processor. So we have a group of these in the food processor. I definitely have to do this in batches because there's a lot of cucumbers, there are a lot of larger cucumbers, and it doesn't all fit in my food processor. But once you get that about 3/4 of the way full, you'll put your lid on, and then we'll go ahead and pulse it. You want it to be whatever consistency you like for your relish. I like my relish to be a little bit chunkier. That looks pretty good to me. Now, I will say these larger cucumbers do have quite a few seeds in them, so there will be seeds in this relish. I don't mind it. My husband doesn't mind it. Anybody that I'm going to be giving this to won't mind it. But if you do mind seeds, just make sure you either scoop them out or use smaller cucumbers that don't have the real big seeds. Just kind of personal preference. So we will go ahead and take this and pour it into our measuring cup here. I like to take the blade out first. Set it aside. I can already see a ton of water in the bottom of this, but we'll take care of that here in just a little bit. I always like to have a rubber spatula handy. I think they're both in the dishwasher, so we'll just use a wooden spoon. But you just want to use something to get all this out of here. If you leave it in there, it'll just continue to pulse down each batch, and you do not want that. Wow, I'm gonna need a much bigger bowl. That's it. Don't mind me here. I always struggle. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and speed this process up where I do the rest of this, and then I will come back with you once I get all of these cucumbers all ground up like this, and we will go from there. So I made a rookie mistake here and recorded this part of the video the wrong way, so I had to remove it. But pretty much what I did is after I got all 8 pounds of cucumbers, I put them all in my crock pot. I didn't have a bowl big enough to hold all of that, so I put it in my crock pot, added 4 cups of water, a cup of salt, some turmeric, and some pepper, and then I just let it sit for 2 hours. After that 2 hours is up, then we go back and we check on it. So it's been 2 hours. We're gonna go ahead and take our cucumbers and strain them into here. We're gonna give it a really good rinse. Make sure we get all of the salt off, and then it's going in a pot on the stove with some onions and a few other spices. So let's do that. Make sure this is cool water. I don't know if this is going to fit or not, but we're just going to go for it. Almost all the way, but I don't want it to be too bad, so we'll do it in batches. It smells so good. So I'm just kind of using my hands to get the water down in here and make sure that we get all of this salt rinsed off. I realized I definitely should have cut this recipe in half. So that's my first lesson. I'm going to give it one more good rinse here. Now I'm going to go ahead and push it down and try to get as much liquid to come out of the bottom of the strainer as possible. You could use utensils for this, obviously, but it just makes so much more sense to do it with your hands, because you can feel how much water is actually coming out of this. I'm going to toss this into the pan on the stove, and then we will go ahead and do the rest of this before we move on. So it does look like quite a bit of this was a little too fine for my strainer. So I guess in the future, I should use a finer strainer. Keep that in mind. So now we'll rinse this batch and we will be good to start cooking. Okay, that's good. Let's head to the stove. Okay, now we're over here at the stove. I have my jars in the canner warming up. This will just come to a simmer. We're not going to boil these. No need to sterilize them. It just says bring them to a slight simmer and get them good and hot. We have our cucumbers in here. We're going to add up some diced onion. This came from our garden, so these are our garden onions. 1/3 cup of sugar, and 4 cups of vinegar. It says white wine vinegar. I'm just using distilled white vinegar. It doesn't really matter as long as it has 5% acidity or more. This is actually 6% acidity. So we're going to mix all of that together and get it coming to a boil. I have small jars that I'm using. Anything that won't fit in those, I'm just going to go ahead and put in a large jar, and we will use it as dill relish now instead of canning it, because this is a huge recipe and I should have paid attention and halved it, but I didn't. So we will make do with what we have. So we're going to get all this together, and then we're going to bring it up to a boil. Once it gets to a boil, we're going to reduce the heat and just let it slowly boil, stirring it occasionally for about 10 minutes. Okay, so our relish has finished cooking, and our jars are hot, so we are going to go ahead and grab the hot jars and start filling them with the relish. I'm just going to go ahead and see what all I could fit in these jars, and then anything that's left we'll just put in a big jar to use now, rather than actually canning it. I'm going to ladle this into these jars right here. We want to leave about a 1/2 inch head space. So I'm thinking 2 ladles might be about perfect. The reason you warm these jars up first is because if you put hot liquid into a not hot jar, it could crack and bust and break, and we do not want that to happen. Okay, so I have these 2 packed. I still have the other 5 to do, but before I do that, I'm going to grab a butter knife, and I'm just going to make sure any air bubbles that are in there get pushed out. You'll do this to every jar. And then you might end up needing to add a little extra, just based on the space that it fills in. Looks like I can use a little bit extra in each of these. And then we will take our sterilized lids and put them on and band them up. Okay, before we put our lids on, we do want to go ahead and just wipe the rim. Make sure there's nothing left on there. And then after, you just kind of do it fingertip tight. Set these back over into the canner. Let's grab a couple more here. And we will just repeat this process until they are all full and ready to be canned. Okay, so our canner here is full of all of those, and the recipe says to make sure it's covered with water, bring to a boil, and then process for 15 minutes. So we're going to go ahead and take these, drop them down into the water. We want to make sure they are fully covered. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and bring this to a boil. One thing I noticed, I definitely could have used a smaller canner. However, this is the only one I have. I bought it last year for $5 at a rummage sale. And I didn't know if I'd even have a second year of gardening at that point. I didn't know if I'd like it. I didn't know what the future held. So I was like, yeah, we'll get it for $5 and see how it works. I did not end up using it last year, but we're definitely making use of it this year. So this is the first thing I've ever canned. If you have any tips or pointers, if you see anything that I did wrong or could do better, please comment below, because I am all about constructive criticism. Like I said, I am just kind of winging it here. So we will let this get up to a boil, and then it will need to boil for 15 minutes. Put this lid on for now, and then you'll notice here we still had quite a bit left in here, so I'm actually going to go ahead and just get this into another jar, and we will just use it now in different recipes and hot dogs, you know, stuff like that. Like tonight I'm making crab cakes for dinner. I could easily put this with some mayo, and we have a tartar sauce. Another thing to add to my list is canning funnels, because I make a mess doing it this way. And I know they make funnels for ball jars. I'm just trying to get by with what I have. We try to get things secondhand if possible. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. But it smells like pickle juice in my kitchen. It's not a bad thing around here. Now this will just go into the fridge after it cools. We're not going to can it or anything like that. So I'm just going to make sure the rim's nice and clean. Just stick a lid on there. I like to use dry erase markers because I reuse lids for fridge pickles and stuff like that. So I'm just going to put today's date on there, 8/8/21, and put dill relish. We will let that cool and put it in the fridge, and we have dill relish for the rest of the month, maybe the rest of the summer. I don't know. So we'll just set that aside. Let's check on our canner, see if it's boiling. Not yet. Once this comes to a boil, we'll boil it for 15 minutes, and then we will take the lid off, wait about 5 minutes, remove the jars and put them on a paper or on a heat-proof surface, a towel, a cutting board, something like that. Let them sit overnight for 24 hours. We will come back tomorrow evening, take the lids off, and make sure they all sealed. So I will show you that when the time comes. Okay, so it has been 24 hours since we've canned this relish. I will say last night I made dinner after I canned these and set them aside, and I heard each one of them make the little pop sound, which is supposed to be a good thing. That means they sealed, and so that sound was just so satisfying. The first couple happened, and I was like, ooh, cool, ooh, cool. And then Lair heard one, and he's like, oh, what was that? And I explained it to him. And so then the next few popped, and we were both like, yeah, pop. So that was just a really neat experience for us. But we're going to take these screws off and check them and see how we did. I guess the dogs are coming too. Okay. So I should be able to screw this. Ta-da! That is sealed relish. So you want to go ahead and remove all of your bands. The bands do not stay on when you go to store them. It could create a false seal, and they're not necessary. So we will remove all of these bands. And we have successfully canned 7 jars of dill relish. I would call this a success. Stay tuned for more videos because now that I know that I can successfully, I'm going for it. And I can't wait to bring you guys along and show you how to can as well. Thanks so much for hanging out in the kitchen with me today. And as always, cultivate originality.